one of the things we always tweaking things. In life, if you're in business, you constantly are tweaking things. So I asked the premier what keeps him up at night. I'm always trying to find a new idea. What is it that we can do to make the conference as interesting as we can constantly? So one of the new sections we added this year is this whole idea of what's trending. At a global level, for successive years, we've also had the fortunate opportunity to have the oil report presented with us, and today we're going to have that. And then over the last 10 years, one of the things we've done with in Business BVI, and I do apologize, the magazine is on its way, but I can assure you it's printed and published, and I'll show you a copy in a little bit later on, is we wanted to add all of those sections together, but the part I wanted to mention was that we started early on in the magazine's life to add a section on the real estate. And it's quite interesting, and Ed will make that presentation a little bit later on, what the trend lines have been over the last 10 years. I have to commend Ed for doing that, and I think it's one of the more anticipated pieces of the issues in the magazine that people look forward to. Now we're going to go through and begin to what I started a little bit last year. Forgive me for a second to find my notes. My daughters kid me and says, you get older, you see less. So forgive me. Good thing they're not in the room. They'll say, Daddy. Good. This is interesting. And it's interesting from the standpoint of, we all probably heard about SpaceX being able to launch the satellite and land it back at the same pad from whence it took off. Why is it interesting? It's interesting, first I think as a human achievement, that we're able to send a rocket up, I hope they don't use it for the wrong reasons, and bring it back to where it started. But also I think this has potential as it goes into the area of tourism, actually, space tourism. But I put it on a list because I really think it's an accomplishment as a human accomplishment. Drones. There are drones everywhere. We heard, I think last year, that not FedEx, UPS, and also Amazon is intended to deliver, well, not here, but your products in the United States by drone. I think that's interesting, and it's only an indication. I think even here in the BVI, the government recently put out some rules about using drones. This is an interesting idea of using a drone as an ambulance. You know, it can get to wherever the location is, avoid the traffics and blowing all over the place, and get there very quickly and move this is what it looks like should it happen. I think it's quite interesting, needless to say. But again, this is where technology is, I'm sure in our lifetime, is taking us. Premier, there's, I hope, an opportunity to bring one for the BVI. Here's another use of drones, potentially longer term, where it becomes a one-passenger autonomous vehicle, actually. Again, being able to, we heard about flying cars when you were younger. This perhaps is where this whole thing is going to go. And there's a lot of investment going on in this space by people like certainly Richard Branson and others. Eli Musk certainly comes to mind. You even hear about Apple getting in the car business. This is interesting. This is a new technology being used by Airbus to build planes that essentially using carbon fiber, as you see, that will make the planes a lot lighter. But the important thing, it is rumored that it will also help the issue of jet lag. And for those of you, I should say us, who travel regularly all over the world, I am sure we will welcome that should it happen. And for those of you with money, if you want to have your own butler, as Mr. Zuckerberg is proposing to do, there's no shortage of potential. I'm sure once he does it, everybody else will be following suit. This I found was interesting, and going back to the Premier's comment about opening up the minds of young people. there's a lot of interesting things that this guy, I think, yes, he's 20 years old, and we all probably know of the huge amount of plastic that is in the world out there. And he's proposing to find a way to clean it up. Not only proposing it, he's actually doing it, as you will see. Again, he's 20 years old. So it'll make, Dr. Prickman, I thought it would be interesting for someone who's responsible for ocean. This is what the machine and technically it would look like. And it would be a huge thing if he's successful in doing it, because there are some areas in the Pacific where there are huge amount of space where there's tons and tons and tons of plastic. You don't readily know about it, but believe it's out and it's causing its own stress and damage to the environment.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, a solar bench for charging.
Get some volume.
There are 5 of these in London, 4 here in Canary Wharf. There's the solar panel, here's the battery, and here are the charging points. This one comes with 1 cable for an iPhone, 1 micro USB cable for pretty much everything else, and these can be very easily replaced if, and indeed when, they get pinched. And there are 2 USB ports for your own charger down here too. Also, 2 wireless charging points, should your phone have that function too. Now, this is not just a solar bench, it is also a smart bench, because this bench monitors the temperature, the pollution level, and the ambient noise, which you can call up on the accompanying app. You are nothing if you don't have an accompanying app these days.
I found that interesting, particularly us with all our mobile phones and what have you, and where do you charge them. So I don't know if Mr. Vanterpool is here. I'm sure we can use 1 or 2 around Rotown. Facebook, I'm not a Facebook user, but my family, and I'm sure a lot of you are. This gives you a sense as to the usage, and this is in millions of people all over the world. It's really dominating our lives. It will continue to dominate our lives. Switching to the global economy, which is always an interesting place.
We, the trade ministers of Australia, Brunei Darussalam, Canada, Chile, Japan, Malaysia, Mexico, New Zealand, Peru, Singapore, the United States, and Vietnam are pleased to announce that we have successfully concluded the Trans-Pacific Partnership negotiations.
That's a huge deal. Assuming it goes through, it has to be approved by 12 countries. It's projected to be the largest regional trade deal in the world, 12 countries, as I said. It ties countries from Canada, Chile, Australia, Japan. 40% of the world's economy will be tied up there should it happen. Trillions of dollars are going to be in motion should it be approved. Why is it relevant to us? For us, really, invariably, there will be disputes dawn. And I trust that some of the disputes can be resolved and settled in the BVI. It'll go on for years and years. And that's why it's relevant to us. And certainly I hope beyond that some of the structures that the BVI has would also be some of the vehicles that are used to make some of those investments. The US economy, as I said earlier in my comments, continue to do quite well. And it's an economy and growth rate that some people will die for, given what's going on globally. At the end of December, you can see the job growth for December was close to 300,000. Employment has moved considerably down from 7% to under 5%. So the U.S. continues to be a strong point globally. It speaks for itself in terms of the economic movement in the 3rd quarter. Consumers are spending. That's very good for us, because if they're spending, chances are hopefully they're spending on travel and coming to the BVI. Corporations have a ton of money. You can see that $1.4 trillion, don't know what to do with it. I think the U.S. has been discussing, can they find a way to get some of it back into helping with infrastructural things. And we'll see. It's interesting that's going on. This I found was interesting. There's so much wind farms in parts of Texas that are literally giving you between 9 and 6 free electricity. Premier, we're going to be next. I thought it was quite interesting. Similarly, in the U.S., finally, the Fed has decided, after much talking about the interest rate, they have gone up. But projections are, if you look at this chart, for example, from 1820 back to now, the rates, it seems like the rates are not going to be moving terribly fast. For those of you who have to invest, perhaps now's the time to hunker down and to do so. There's a couple of tough areas. Needless to say, the areas of the heartland of the US, particularly areas that are dependent on commodities, are having challenges. Places like North Dakota that was running off the map in terms of economic activities begin to slow down as fracking and all that stuff moves to a little bit slower pace as the price of oil has dropped. And here we go. Interesting, this is an election year in the US, and it is a wild ride. We've all been following it, and the caucuses are coming up, and it's all getting very heated. Why is it important to us? The US is our largest trading partner. It's important that we keep up with what's going. Who's going to get into the White House? Who's going to lead the US in the next 4 years come November? Only God knows. Is the President Trump in our future? Who knows? Or Hillary? Or only God knows. But it certainly is an interesting thing, and we all need to be aware of it, certainly, and see where it goes. It's funny because each president, new president, in my estimation, is kind of influenced by his predecessor. The president from last night, State of the Union, his last, there's the winning Barack smile. He got quite a few things done last year. Notwithstanding, people thought he might not get anything done, and a lot of it was to the pragmatism, I would call it that, of Paul Ryan. The prior speaker, Mr. Boehner, who I saw was visiting the BVI, we certainly welcome him. Seemed to be more practical and pragmatic. He made it very clear if he was going to be speaker and the conditions under which, so he was certainly able to help the president get a budget through that. For the first time, I think, in several years, there's a budget that goes from now to, I think, the end of September this year. So it's quite an achievement, and we'll see where it goes. The sharing economy is an interesting area, and that's an area that is increasingly growing, and we'll chat a little bit about it this afternoon in our tourism panel. It's not a new idea in any way. Monasteries many years ago used to loan books to, in the Middle Ages, farmers shared tools, but it's beginning to take off in many ways, both as an investment vehicle and an area of opportunity. And it's totally valued probably now about $219 billion. Some of the manifestations of it really are things like in tourism, Airbnb, Uber, and Lyft. There's a lot of other sharing ideas going on. It's something that I'm sure in years is going to continue to grow. The emerging markets, I mentioned that a little bit earlier in some of my comments, be Brazil, China, India. They have kind of, I think, lost some of their shine, and a lot of it is driven, I should say, by the slowdown in China and the need for commodities. A lot of the countries dependent on it. Modi is an interesting character in terms of what he's trying to do in India. He suffered a huge defeat, I should say. Modi doesn't even know who the devil I am, so I can get away saying it. He invested a lot of time and energy in trying to win that the elections in Bihar, and he certainly wasn't very successful. And why it was important for him, obviously, he wanted to continue to push through his economic reforms, and that is one of the largest states, and that he did not control. And in some ways, he suffered as a result of that, a setback, I should probably, as the thing says. I mean, the challenges in the BRIC countries are at the level now where the IMF and others are trying to find ways to spur growth, and for obvious reasons. And as I said, commodity prices, where it's oil, copper, wheat, it's falling globally. Places like Australia having to reposition their economies because of that. And it's going to have implications. In the US, similarly, as I mentioned, in the Midwest, and places like Chile and those countries that are hugely into export, and Brazil is really having serious trouble. And it will probably continue for some time. I mean, we like the price of oil to be low, but I don't know how low it gets here. But the China challenge. China is huge. And the reason I know many of you wonder, why is it we're always talking about China? Well, for a lot of reasons, actually. It's a huge economy. It's the second largest in the world, projected to probably be even bigger than the US in 10 or 15 years' time. They reduced their rate of growth as I mentioned, from 7% or more to 6.5%. But they're having challenges in terms of the economy, and as they reposition China from manufacturing to services, it's also creating its challenges. But I can tell you, as I'm sure Carson will tell us this afternoon, there are also tons of opportunities. China is flexing its muscles. The AIIB is one of the initiatives, and again, Carson will speak this afternoon to why is this important. It's part of China's, in my estimation, strategy likewise, to make sure that it can recreate the whole Silk Road thing and begin to have a lot more trade in that part of the world directly, very close to them. Why is it relevant to us? It goes back to what I said about BVI structures. All of that investment is going to leave China to make these things happen. It has to use, I want to think, it's going to use vehicles. Are they going to be BVI vehicles? Why not BVI vehicles? And to the extent that there are BVI vehicles, we should continue to see our financial services in other areas grow. And as I said earlier, should some of these things go wrong, I hope we will also have the dispute resolutions taking place here. China's one-child policy has ended, and it didn't end it just, I want to say, not just because they thought it was done. The reality is that China itself, I mean, it's $1.3 billion, whatever it is, but they too are looking out into the future and seeing that they're going to have aging population and not having replacement for them. So it makes sense to amend it. This is interesting. There's some interesting things going on regionally with China and its neighbors, be it Philippines and other countries. This is an island, one of many islands that they're building that's causing tons of stress with some of the Asian neighbors, but also the US and them monkeying around. But this was built in relatively no time. So Premier, don't worry. We all know the World Bank has accepted the renminbi as one of the world's leading currencies, which is good news for China, but it's also having its challenges back at home as a result of it. And this gives you some sense. This is 2005 in terms of foreign investment overseas by the Chinese. If you look at that same map in 2013, you know, each one of those bubbles has a valuation. You won't be able to see the thing in the corner. So you see it's not something to be sneezed at, and it's only increasing. You know, between 2005, this is kind of where it's going on globally. The EU continues to be a point of, at least from an economic standpoint, an area of challenge. Where it's going to go, only God knows. Last year, we saw the whole spectacle of the migration taking place before us, and wasn't good. But they have to deal with it, and it's a challenge for the EU. How do they deal with it? I found this interesting. Not only the election thing in Spain, but the conversation there between Angela Merkel and the person whose back is to you is Mr. Tsipras from Greece. You wonder what in God's name are they talking about? This is what happened to Greece. They started out seemingly strong, and then it's gone back south. It's challenging. Our own Mr. Cameron has ambitions about discussing the relationship with the UK, and as it relates to the EU, are they in, are they out? What does that mean for the BVI? Should he decide to, or should the people of the UK decide they want to be out? It's an interesting one, and that debate is going to go on. I think there's a referendum planned for 2017. Some people think if the British were to leave the EU, it'll be not only a disaster for the EU, but some people think it'll be a disaster for the UK. Whether or not Cameron is using it as a tactical tool to get what he wants, only God knows. Hope he gets something for us in the process. And out of one of the bright spots actually with this whole migration movement is the fact that I think one of the reasons Angela Merkel has made the decision that she has, very clever, is that her population too is aging. Gives a chance for some new people to come in to be trained. And the Syrian people are quite well educated actually, to help them to deal with potential challenges down the road. Terrorism has raised its ugly head again, and I hope doesn't go any further than that. For us in tourism, it's something we constantly watch and worry about it. Premier, if you ask me what keeps me up at night, something happening in New York, worst case even in the Caribbean, what do we do, and how do we respond to it? There's not much we can do. We try to stay out of trouble, but trouble comes to you at times. The Paris attacks we all watched and saw on TV, San Bernardino, and before that, Sinai. It's something we have to be aware of. It seems to be part of life again, as it was when I was a younger man in the early 80s. But hopefully it's contained, and if there begin to be more problematic challenges for us also. And I wanted to end on the note of New Year's resolution, not my resolution. I try not to make those, because you make them and by the following day they're gone. Good. I hope you found it interesting. Thank you.